Yes, we can.
Hello.
Okay, thank you.
We can hear you, Candace, but I'm going to go ahead and mute you until we get to public comment, okay? Oh, it looks like you got it yourself. Thanks.
All right. Hello, everybody out in the virtual world. This is the meeting of April 21st, 2021 Design Review Board. This meeting is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with the state of California executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Live stream and Zoom is being utilized for this meeting. In case of technical issues, meetings will be uploaded to the city website as soon as possible after this meeting. We will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. Design Review Board members and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting by the use of Zoom as noted in the city's website and as noted on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak may do so during public comment or may comment on agenda items during the discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. And anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way to provide public comment. All right. So our meeting will come to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Sure. And just to note, I did hear from Marshall that although he's an alternate, so he doesn't need to be here for this meeting since other members are here, he was not able to make today's meeting. So I'll start with Chair Luthen.
Present.
Vice Chair Leinberg.
Here.
Thank you. Carrie Bush.
Here.
Ron Harry.
Here.
And Christine Lovell.
I think she's muted.
All right, I can see that she's here. I'm going to ask her to unmute and see if we can get a verbal.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thanks, Christine. All right, so everyone here is here on the regular board and the alternate is absent today.
Sounds great. Thank you for that. Review of our minutes from March 17th. I think, Christine, you were not there for that meeting, but looks like that we have enough of other people that were there for that meeting. Anybody have any comments on the minutes? And if not, can I get a motion for approval?
I have no comments, and I make a motion to approve the minutes as noted.
Okay. Any additional comments? And if not, can I have a second?
There you go. Second. Either one.
All right. Sounds good. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of approval of the minutes, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes are approved. Thank you for that. Moving back to our agenda here. Planning Department update on matters of general interest.
Okay, a few items to report of interest. We had a few items at the council meeting last night. One was our climate action subcommittee, which is up and running. We'll be recruiting for a couple of the vacant spots. They also approved adding a second alternate, a student alternate, given this, the students tend to have some other requirements, and that they tend to generally be juniors and then leave. There is a desire to have another student on that board, and then I believe there's an environmental justice position. And so if you do know of folks in the community who might be interested in that, the information for that will be posted shortly, and I believe will be open for about 6 weeks or so. So looking forward to getting that committee, which already has about 12 folks on it, staffed, fully brought up to speed on that. We also had a presentation from Ned Kahn, the artist for the first artist that was selected by the Public Art Committee in the city for the first art commission through our Public Art Fund. They approved both his new concept, which is a 35-foot with a 4-foot by 4-foot twisted spire, and the location for that was approved is northwest of the Highway 12 bridge. So the original location was within the Caltrans right away, right at the east side of the Highway 12 bridge at the entry to town. The Caltrans proved a bit too difficult and expensive to deal with for that project, so our PAC has been working with the artist to find a different spot, and so it will actually be about 150 feet back from the roadway, but still visible as you're coming into town. And council approved that and really appreciated the efforts of the PAC. And Lars, I'm sure you saw the email last night that that's approved, and so that'll be moving forward soon. We also did our annual level of service report to the council. So if you're interested in that, I'll also be presenting that next Tuesday at the Planning Commission. If you missed that but want to hear it, otherwise it's available on the website. And then lastly, the Planning Commission next Tuesday, and then at their next couple of meetings are having a series of presentations regarding various types of housing from nonprofit housing developers to look at potentially innovative and new ways of either financing or developing housing. I think I'll leave it at that so we can get to our main topics unless there are any questions from the board.
Sounds good. Any questions from board members?
Nope.
Seeing none, we will move on to, do we have any comments from the public regarding items not on our agenda? And did we receive anything by email?
The only issues we received or comments we received were in relation to the next item.
Okay. Then we will go ahead and move to our next item, statements of conflict of interest. Anybody have any conflicts on this issue? Since we have a one item agenda, I would assume not. So let's just move straight into our regular agenda item, Huntley Square.
Thank you, Ted. I do want to note that obviously Alan Montes, I forgot to say, his last day was Monday, as you're all aware, as the staff. We do have Kelly Hickler with us today. She's going to be taking over the Huntley Square project. And this is her, she's reviewed the materials, but I'll be presenting today and she'll be listening to help get her up to speed on the issues as we head through this process.
Great.
So I will jump into Huntley Square with that. And this application is the conceptual review for a planned community district. The project itself is a 10-unit sort of mini townhome project. They're studio units subdivision at the Huntley Square site, and the process that the entitlements that they're looking at include the planned community rezoning, which is some people call it a planned unit development, but it allows people to look at a different zoning designation that is based on the existing zoning, but may have some differentiation. They are looking at a subdivision, so they need a use permit for that, which will be heard by the Planning Commission. However, as part of our process, the DRB reviews the preliminary planned community zoning and provides recommendations both to the applicant as well as to the Planning Commission for their review. We will be doing an initial study for CEQA for this project, and other entitlements will include design review, and there's a couple of tree removal permits that will be required on the existing site. Those won't be heard by you today. That comes back after council approval. But we do anticipate if there are any discussion or preliminary comments from the DRB or the tree board, and you're the same group, but wearing either of your hats regarding any issues to the applicant, you're certainly welcome to make comments on those today, as well as on the planned community rezone. I do want to just for clarity walk you through what the process is for the planned community zoning, so that you understand, and the applicant and the public, because we do have a few members of the public here, how this works. So this is the first meeting. The DRB will, as I noted, provide recommendations to the applicant and to staff. on the planned community zoning part of it. So that's the setbacks, the proposed heights, any variation from the R7 multifamily zoning district that the project is located in. We'll then complete the environmental review documents. There is a 30-day notice for that. There's also a 30-day notice on the site prior to the Planning Commission hearing the project. The next step in the hearing process will be the Planning Commission, which will look at the use permit, the subdivision, tentative map, and the CEQA documents, and then they will provide a recommendation to council. They won't be looking at, they'll be looking at the lot configuration, the subdivision map, and the zoning, but not at the design and the tree removal. Once they've recommended to council, council will act on it, and if approved, the applicant would then return to the design review board for the actual design review and any tree removal permits.
Good to know. Okay, thank you for that
It's a
clarification.
long
That's
process,
helpful.
but this is the first of ultimately a minimum of 4 hearings related to this project, 3 of which will be pertaining to the zoning and the subdivision, and then the last would be the last step being the actual design review and tree removal. And so the site itself is as outlined in the site sorry, let me just flip through my documents here and pull up the staff report. The site itself is over 15,000 square feet, so it is eligible for the planned community zoning. You have in your packet, starting on page 3, and I'm happy to pull any of these documents up as you might see fit. A listing that shows the current R7 zoning standards and then the proposed planned community zoning standards. And the main differences from these are, I'll start with the similarities. The similarities are that the height limit for the structures is proposed to be the same, and actually the proposal is a much stricter height limit than what would be allowed in the district. The front setback along Bodega is still maintained at a 10-foot setback. The overall lot coverage and overall square foot per unit meets the same requirements. The parking requirements, which is for the size of unit that's proposed, 1 parking space per unit is being provided on site. They are actually, in their frontage improvements, will actually be providing a number of parking spaces on Bodega Avenue as well, which could be utilized for guest parking or other public parking needs. And then the open space requirement is actually higher than what is required by almost triple. The differences that they're requesting is the size of the individual lots within, so there's a common area, just like a condo or other townhome subdivision would have. The common area includes the parking, carports, trash enclosures, and then a central walkway through the project. But the actual minimum lot sizes would be smaller than if it was just a straight R7 subdivision. And then the internal, because it's townhome development, they're requesting that the internal between each of the units on the site, side yards be 0. The rear yard setback, they are requesting for the individual lots is 8 feet. And so in this case, the rear, as you'll see when the applicant does their presentation, the rear setback is actually the current side setback. So that would be the east and west adjoining the sort of parallel with Golden Ridge and perpendicular from Bodega Avenue. Additionally, they're not proposing any accessory structures be allowed within the smaller individual lots, but they do have accessory structures, and specifically a carport that is proposed on the north, along the north property line, and that they are requesting to reduce the eastern setback for that to 1 foot along the east property line. I will note we don't require parking to be covered, so a couple of options should the design review board wish to discuss. they could either remove the carport entirely, or they could only cover a portion of it and still meet the current setbacks for the property, if that's advised. And I know the applicant has a presentation to go over sort of the actual layout of that, so I will let them go ahead and do that. But I do want to make a couple of comments. We did receive some public comments. One was in regards to the off-site trees. There is a large coast live oak on the to the southeast of this property along Bodega Avenue, but on the eastern property. And then there are 4 significant heritage trees that are along the western property line. One of them is a redwood tree that's right near where the trash enclosure is. And then there's 4 others further down that property line. We did request our arborist take a look at this. They did submit an arborist report with the project, but our city arborist, as you know, always goes out and does a peer review of that and looks at any concerns. She did have some concerns. She doesn't have a full report yet, but she does, since we don't have an actual tree permit, but because we're discussing potential property lines and the zoning in this meeting, we did want to convey those to you. And she does have some concerns with all of those offsite trees, and in particular, the redwood tree near the trash would be 50%, have 50% of its root zone paved over. And then for the coast live oak, there is a retaining wall that returns north-south along that property line on this property. That would be a potential concern. And there's a drain line there as well, and she wanted to make sure that the project would be designed so that those don't conflict with the root zone for that tree. I have discussed that briefly with the applicant, as well as a couple members of the public, and so they are aware of that issue, and they may address that as part of their comments today, or we'll need to address those as the project moves forward. The second concern, major concern, was the fact that the main egress for this is off of Golden Ridge Avenue. So the pedestrian access will be off of Bodega via a staircase and a retaining wall that's needed for the sidewalk and frontage improvements to be constructed. The main access would be via an access easement that crosses the eastern property. That is a recorded easement, access easement, so that is a valid way of accessing the property. One of the major things that the project would be responsible for is frontage improvements. As many of you may know from living in town, the Bodega Avenue is a major arterial for the city, and it has 2 major sidewalk gaps, we call them, where there is no sidewalk, and this is one of them. And so this would actually project would actually be required to construct curb gutter sidewalk, and they will need to do, take off, obviously the hill kind of comes into the roadway in that area, and so they will need to do a retaining wall to do that. That retaining wall is a little bit higher than we would normally, and I know what the DRB would normally want on those, so we would like to get some comments on that. The one note I would have is, the topography continues to go up from there, so if it was to be tiered and terraced in, the overall height of retaining walls would end up being higher, because they'd be, what I call chasing grade up the hillside, and the next, the further up retaining wall would have to be a little bit higher because the grade they're trying to match would be higher in that. And so with that, I'd like to take any questions, and then we can move to the applicant's presentation.
Sounds good. Yeah, I really appreciate the staff report. It's excellent as usual. Any questions of staff from our board members?
Would the road be widened at that point? There's kind of a berm out there. You said something about a sidewalk. Would that match the rest of the road? Because
Yeah, so the sidewalk will, thank you, Ron. The sidewalk will tie into the existing sidewalk on either side, and same with the curb and gutter. And then they will also be adding some parking spaces as well. So there is room for that as well.
All right.
Any other questions of staff?
I had a question. Just in one of the public comments, there was a comment about why other developments proposed for this site did not go forward. I don't know if you have any,
Sure.
knowledge of the history of the site.
Sure. So this project was originally proposed back in either 2016 or 2017, I believe, as a preliminary review. And that in itself is not a approval process. It's what I like to call a study session. There's no decision made at that point. It's a way for someone who has an idea about a project to get feedback from folks from the design review board or the planning commission in terms of what if they're what if they like the overall concept, and also what issues are identified at that time. They usually use that as a way of getting their project ready for submittal later on. And so the applicant has gone through that process, but as I said, that isn't an approval process in itself. It's just a preliminary meeting with the city's boards and commissions to review the project. I will note that they did also submit last year, I think it was last year, as I can tell, because it was in person, so it was more than a year ago, a request for a development agreement. And that was, we had a preliminary review with the planning commission on that. And the intent of that was to see if there was any financial support the city could offer because of the major sidewalk frontage improvements that would need to be constructed. The city itself has improvement plans for Bodega Avenue in the works, as well as looking at closing, completing the sidewalk in this part of, at this section, as well as the other sidewalk gap further down. And so we already had, we did look at that. It went through both our planning commission and our city council. And our city council did express some support for some, I believe it was through reduction of some of the impact fees should the project move forward. No decision was made on that. It was if you call it a straw poll indicative, so that the applicant had that information as they worked the project, that any agreement like that would be part of the final approval when it's heard by council.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I have a much simpler question also. In your staff report, you talk about, as a design thing, that existing fences will be reused, I think. A very sort of minor design point. We can talk about that with the applicant, but I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Yeah, I think I'll let the applicant address that. They probably know more about the particulars. I know Alan was working on that, but I'm not exactly up to speed, I'll admit, on that detail, so I'll let the applicant address that.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions? All right, seeing none, I'd invite our applicant to give us a little presentation.
Can we, is there a share screen? Oh yeah, got it. Hi, I'm Beth Farley, and I'm going to share a screen with you. Y'all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, how's everybody doing? I'm Beth Farley. I am a partner and the principal architect at Healthy Buildings. Bob Massaro is the CEO and the other partner at Healthy Buildings. And Dante Love is also here today. He's the other developer on the project. Henley Square is a 10-unit mini townhome village priced for Sebastopol's workforce. When we initially sort of saw this site and started to figure out what we were going to try to do here, the biggest thing we really wanted to do was try to create housing that was affordable for not affordable housing, but housing that's affordable. And so we thought about a lot of different things. It's not a very big lot. So we thought, how can we get something that's big enough, that's livable, but yet small enough that is at a low price point. So we came up with these mini townhome ideas. We ran this by the city back in 2017, I believe it was, maybe even 2016 point, to just get an idea of how people felt about this. And it was very positively reviewed. Healthy Buildings is a company that is a Napa-based design build firm. We have a 40-year track record throughout California. We build zero net energy, ultra low water consumption buildings, and we focus on healthy interior air quality, and we don't ever put natural gas into our projects. One of the things that we looked into when we were designing this project was well, first of all, let me explain something. I lived in Sebastopol for 15 years and I raised my children there. And so I'm not new to the Sebastopol city and its price of housing. I owned a home there and I squeaked into it, and it's just pretty outrageously expensive. So we knew that there was an issue there. We knew that we needed to have things that were more affordable. And so we've done a little research. In 2019, the median house value in Sebastopol was $638,600. And I just did a little quick math. That would be a $2,771 monthly mortgage after you put down $127,000. Today, because of, I think, maybe the pandemic and all the people trying to get to bigger lots, the median home price right now in Sebastopol is $970,000. So that's a monthly mortgage of $4,200 after a 20% down payment of $194,000. So things are expensive, they're exploding out there. So we're trying to propose something that will help alleviate some of those issues. Since 2010, Sebastopol's population has increased over 5.3%. Sebastopol's home values have gone up 10.5% in the past year. And over 54% of Sebastopol's units are single family homes, mostly 2 to 3 bedroom units. Most housing units in Sebastopol were built between 1960 and the early 2000s. Who we're trying to serve is either first-time home buyers, empty nesters that want to downsize, young professionals trying to get into the market, aging at home, and hopefully Sebastopol's workforce. Aside from the Henley score being more attainable and alternative based, we're hoping the sales prices will be between $450,000 and $475,000. And they'll have extremely low utility bills with the zero net energy and solar panels on the roofs. These homes are also going to be, the way we build them, they'll be more durable, far less maintenance, cost similar to homes that you could go buy that would possibly be that price or a little bit more, that are maybe older, have more maintenance involved, maybe need to have some updates done to them. And hopefully that'll provide homeowners with enhanced quality of life through our sustainable building technology. So the project is, its address is 7950 Bodega Avenue. It's right on Bodega Avenue, right across from the cemetery. It's between Pleasant Hill and Golden Ridge. Faces south, faces the cemetery. This is a rendering that we've done recently. This is right off of Bodega Avenue. This is be the face to the community. You can see the retaining wall, the fences on top, and the pedestrian stairway there in the middle. And these are the sides of 2 of the buildings. We'll get back to some more renderings in a minute. So this is the site plan. You can see Bodega Avenue at the bottom with the 10 parking spaces. And then the curb and gutter, the sidewalk, we have a 5-foot utility easement that the city needs to have for undergrounding utilities there. Right up the middle is the pedestrian side stairway. Because the property is so high at the back, and I can show you some pictures of what it looks like now, but it basically right now the hill spills out onto Bodega Avenue, interrupting what would be a sidewalk, which it's not there right now, but where the sidewalk would go. And it's actually all the way into the road. So we would cut that back, put in the retaining wall that you can see here on either side of the stairway, and then build the 10 mini townhomes with the access coming in from Golden Ridge from the east, with the 10 owner parking spaces in the back. And then we also have the trash enclosure to the west. And each of the mini townhomes has a little yard. They're about 8 feet at the minimum, but some of them are bigger than that. And then we have the common courtyard up the middle with all the porches facing the center, trellis kind of as the entrance back to the common pedestrian area where the owners get out of their cars. We've also gone to great lengths about the trees, and I wanted to talk about the trees a little bit right here while we have the site plan open. The tree to the, let's say the northwest is the redwood that we've been talking about. And the lighter color there, that's the paving on the parking in the back, is a permeable paving. And that will allow the water to go down to the roots, and it won't, won't be really like paving over the whole tree. And in our arborist report, there's all kinds of things that we need to do to mitigate to help them stay healthy, fencing them, mulching them, which we're going to do all of that. And then the 3 other trees that are next to this redwood are sort of down the fence line on the neighbor's property to the south a little bit. Then there's another large tree, which I don't have on the site plan, unfortunately, but it's to the right of lot 10. And it's kind of in that open space right there. That's the coast oak tree. And I spoke to Carrie this morning about this, and then I also called our civil engineer and spoke about the retaining wall there and the yard drains, which is, I think, a concern about the roots. And the yard drains are above in elevation where the tree's roots are right now. And the retaining wall will be drilled piles. So what we can do is we can hand dig around the roots, find places where there are no roots, and go in between the roots there. And basically you kind of bridge over the roots so that we will not be disturbing the oak tree's roots in that corner. But I think that's a real common way to do a retaining wall where you have a tree that you're concerned about. And I think it's something that will help the tree. It won't cause the tree any harm, and we can still get the retaining wall in. And the retaining wall only returns up to the back of lot 10 in the private yard there. And then it goes all the way across the front. And then to the left is our stormwater treatment bioretention area, which is where all the stormwater is, runs to and filters through and becomes clean water. So parking on the site, we have 10 spaces in the back where we just were looking on the site for the owners. And then we have 10 spaces off site for the street parking. In comparison, if we were to build a 6-unit project, which each of them were 2 bedrooms, which is similar to what is to the east of us, there are 6 townhomes over there, we would be required to have 12 parking spaces on site. So really our 10 mini townhomes require less parking and less cars going over the neighbor's property than if we had gone with something similar to what's built to the left, to the east of us. We're zoned R7, which you heard Carrie say, multifamily residential. Basically, this means that our minimum density that zoning allows is 4.7, which rounds up to 5, which means since studios count for half of a dwelling unit, we are right at our minimum density for that zoning. So we're not really maxed out, we're right at our minimum. This is a periodic table of sustainable elements, which is something we do here at Healthy Buildings. This has to do with all the things we try to get into every project. This project will have every single sustainable element that has a yellow dot on it, and I can tell you what they are, but I wanted to highlight just a few of them in the next few slides. So we love to build places where people love to live, and we like to create community in the spaces that we build. So the connected community is really important to us. And one of the ways we do that is by creating a courtyard where people's front doors look into, can talk to each other. You can sit out on your porch and talk to your neighbor and get to know your neighbors, make it a beautiful and sustainable and durable home. and extremely low utility bills, which basically the solar panel will do because everything will be electric. There'll be no natural gas. And then of course, low water usage. So I just spoke about the village courtyard where people can get out of their cars or walk up the pedestrian access and meet each other, get to know each other, understand who their neighbors are, feel safer that way. And then the health and energy savings and health savings by being in a zero net energy solar powered project and highly insulated walls and floors and reduce the heat loss, sound attenuation, and no natural gas or off gassing in the units. They're healthier to live in. And then we always pick materials that are very durable and non-toxic, reduce and reuse and recycle materials, low maintenance, and then the landscape will be low water landscape. So I just spoke about community and how important it is to us. And so we did this inspirational image board to just show you sort of some of the ideas that when we went through the design process, what was interesting to us. And we picked these things and tried to develop from them. So, you know, obviously solar panels, we have awnings over the windows that face the south and the west. We have long windows that will let in a lot of natural light. Our common courtyard has places where you could have seats where people could, you know, meet each other and sit down and talk. Loft Living, some of the 6 of the 10 are have upstairs lofts. 4 of them are single story, so aging at home would work well there. 6 of them are living, dining, and kitchen downstairs, and then a stairway up to a loft upstairs, which is the bedroom. And so 6 of them will have very tall ceilings, which opens up the small space quite a bit to make you feel like it's bigger. And then, you know, just functionally trying to develop some nice ideas inside so that, because storage becomes a pretty big deal when you live in less than 600 square feet. So developing underneath the stairway, you know, every little corner and niche that we can put some storage in so that they, you know, you can live in these small spaces. And then the retaining wall will have plants that are built or that are planted on top of it and hanging down. So that will reduce the hardness and the angularness of that retaining wall. These are the exterior materials of the buildings themselves. The main part of the building will be it's a smart side lap siding. It's a wide lap siding and painted in a redwood color. And the exterior windows and doors will be black. They're on the back sides of both of the buildings and on the pop outs. We like to put the vertical corrugated galvanized metal siding, which echoes farm and ranch and vineyard you know, ideas. We have big scuppers to take the water off those flat roofs and coming down the building. We always use LED lights. Modern LED lights will be on this building, and backlit numbers for the front doors. And then right around the front doors where the building insets will be a stucco with a soft white color around the front doors. And then there's another picture there of our awnings over our windows. The landscape materials on the front, I'll show you some pictures again, but right above the retaining wall, there'll be some solid fencing for the backyards, and then that opens up to the hog wire fencing with the steel powder coated frames. And then in the back is a you know, pretty simple carport covered with corrugated, standing seam metal roof, and that's where the owners would park. So current site conditions, this is a picture that shows an aerial view of the site. You can see to the right, you can see to the east, the condos there that are in a circle. And then to the west, there's a single family home with a few other houses behind it. All of these pictures that are sort of spun out around that show what it looks like if you were standing over in the graveyard or sort of across the street or at the back side. This photo at the top right is the condos right on Gold Ridge and Bodega Avenue, and that's the access drive right through there. And then this one right below that, the photo right below that is of the fence. That's where the back driveway would go through, where the cars would park in the back. So this is a rendering of a bird's eye view of what it would look like if you were a bird. You can see the yards in the back. And inset is a little picture of where this is kind of showing you from the air what it is now. The existing site conditions, these are 3 pictures we wanted to show that really show how that hill is kind of coming out across the side or in front of the sidewalk. And it's much higher. You can see how much higher it is than Bodega Avenue there, and how the sidewalk stops. If you look carefully at these pictures, you can see there's 2 signs that stop the sidewalk on either end. So the sidewalk would continue, once it's built, continue right straight through there, same with the curb and gutter, right through there, same line. Here's another view of the front from the eastern side of Bodega. You can see the lapped red siding, the corrugated metal pop-outs, the retaining wall with the plants. We've got that 5-foot utility setback, which we want to plant with luscious grasses and flowers. You can see the pedestrian steps going up to the central courtyard there. And you can also see where one of the front doors is, with the off-white stucco around it. We have a lot of really big, beautiful windows over in the high spaces. So these 2 are both units that have the high loft spaces on them. This is looking right up the middle of the pedestrian court. So you can sort of see how they kind of come in and out throughout in the middle of the courtyard. This is a picture looking from at the access road in the back. So that where you can see the inset picture here where the gates are now. And that would be right at the bottom of our rendering. And this is the carport where the owner's cars would park. To the left is one of the backyards. And you can see the little trellis in the middle there. These are the floor plans. There's basically there's 3 floor plan types, but 2 basic ones. One is, like I said before, all the same level. You walk in the front door, it's the kitchen and dining room together. And then it's the living room, bathroom, and the back bedroom. And then behind that is the backyard. All of the bathrooms on the first floor are ADA accessible. So if you were to get one of these, or if you had a friend who needed that kind of situation, all the first levels are ADA accessible. The pink floor plan shows you the one that has the high ceiling with the loft upstairs. So same situation, you walk in off the front porch, there's the dining and kitchen, living room behind with the half bath, then up the stairs, you would go to the open loft above that with another bath. So the loft units have a bath and a half bath downstairs, full bath upstairs. And the ones on the loft units on the outside edges of those big buildings have the pop out. So what's in the pop out is the shower. I think that's all I had today. I'm ready to take questions. If there's anything you guys want me to go back to, I can do that. Just let me know.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation, Beth. Members of the board, questions? Ron, do you have any questions?
Not at this time. I would like to thank her for the updated renderings. When I first looked at the drawings, I was not impressed, but the new renderings, I think it make it much more homey than it looked from that original drawing. So thanks for breaking that. I feel a little better about it.
Good, I'm glad.
All right, thanks, Ron. Carrie, any questions?
No, not really. Yeah, it's a great presentation and it's really visual. So thank you.
Yeah. Lars, any questions?
I have one question, I think. Well, actually, one question on Windows. What manufacturer do you like to use for Windows?
I've used quite a few different manufacturers. I haven't landed on a specific window on this project because they are large. So we're going to have to look at a few different ones. But, you know, we've used all kinds of different windows. But yeah. I like wood clad, aluminum clad windows or fiberglass. Something that is going to be very energy efficient is going to be the goal.
Mhm. Nice. And then a question on in your description that you presented to in the application to the city, you talked about the court being a fully useful courtyard. So how would you? What does that mean? Like, what is that courtyard and its character to you?
Well, I think the way we said that was that everybody can use it. You know, you can walk through it. There's no fences in it. Nobody's going to have a fence in their front yard. You could plant in it. I mean, if we have a full landscape plan right now with low water plants, what I'm hoping is people are going to put chairs on their front porches, get to know each other. Maybe they can have parties out there, you know, that kind of thing. What I'm really hoping is that this becomes a little community and like a bigger family from where you live.
Okay. You talked about accessible restrooms or bathrooms below. So are you trying to provide like an fully accessible unit, or just all of them have accessible bathrooms and somebody could come from the parking straight through to sort of to any of the units
Yeah,
in a
I
wheelchair?
believe in the code, all of them have to be fully accessible on the first floor. One needs to be a fully ADA unit, and the rest can be adaptable.
Right.
But to be on a ADA path, all of the bathrooms on the first floor have to be accessible. So
Yeah.
there's the space where it's not a commercial accessibility, it's a residential accessibility. It's a little less extreme, but it is still a bit bigger of a bathroom. So.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Bob.
Mhm.
All right. I have a couple questions. Trees are a big concern, and I know you're coming back to trees, but for trees when we get a little further down the road, trees 774 and 773. 773 is the big redwood that's by the trash enclosure.
Right.
And then 774 is going to be directly behind that trash enclosure. How do you envision that trash enclosure being constructed? What's that thing made of?
So right now it's just the same as the fence around the backyards. So it's not a solid situation, and it has gates in the front so people can go in, put their trash in, close the gates back up. The idea, I'm going to just say this because I'm going to forget it, but the idea behind getting those trash cans out to Golden Ridge was to have, there's going to need to be an HOA here to take care of the landscape, to take care of the bioswale, to take care of the parking lot. And also we would employ someone to roll those trash cans out and in every week. So I was considering it to be something that is hiding the cans, but not covered, so that the rain can come through. It's all permeable paving. So it's not a barrier to anything the tree would need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was wondering was, I was envisioning your typical, trash enclosure with concrete or CMU walls, and then you need footings, and then you need, other stuff. So it's more like more of a fence screening structure than a solid structure that's going to require large footings and excavation and that sort of stuff.
Right, and I think because the trash truck is not coming in here, and that's when they require those big concrete bumpers, because the truck can't really do damage with those things. So because they are rollouts, it's much less invasive.
Gotcha. And another question I had was looking at your parking plan. I think the spaces, like the upper right-hand spaces, 8, 9, and 10 on the northeast corner, those are going to be on a pretty good slope, if I'm not mistaken, because you're going to have to kind of come in from Golden Ridge through the neighboring property and then ramp up.
Yeah, it slopes a little bit from where our property starts all the way up to where the ADA pathway goes across.
Yeah, and that parking on that cross slope works. I don't really know what works on a slope and what doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen all kinds of stuff
okay
in San Francisco, but but yes, I believe it works. The civil engineer is fine with the parking where it is.
Sounds good. Okay. Any further questions? If not,
I
I
have
think
some
we're gonna.
Right, there's Christine.
Oh,
Don't forget
Oh, Christine, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I do.
I don't see your smiling face, so I forgot. Christine, I'm sorry. Please.
The first question I have is that wall in the front of the property. It seems like on your rendering view from Bodega Avenue, it seems rather lower than it's actually going to be. Because it seems like it can get up to 8 foot plus based on your civil engineering drawing.
It's only going to be 7.
Well, what I'm asking is, do you have any renderings, or can you provide at some point some renderings that show some real perspective? Like if you're looking at that car that you can barely see
Yeah.
on the left end of the
There's a good-
picture, I mean, the whole thing gives the impression of what you've depicted there is something that is in the line of 4 to 5 feet. I mean, that's how it appears in
Yeah,
that picture, but I think it's going to be substantially higher, and I think that that's going to give a much different perspective of the front of that property from the street level.
yeah, I do have a cross section that shows the retaining wall and a car and a person and the public utility easement way and the curb and gutter and the sidewalk, and I can give that to you. It's not a problem. I think part of
Well, I know, Beth, I looked at that. I can see that, but that's not what this rendering shows, is where I'm going with that. This seems to be substantially lower.
I think the rendering
this
is
wall
correct.
from
I think
this
it's further back, so it looks shorter.
Well, it would be interesting to see a rendering that had actual people on it, so you could get a real perspective
Okay,
of what that proportion really is.
okay.
Because my concern going forward with this project, although I like the project, is that it's going to be somewhat ominous from the street side with the height, between the height of the loft building and the height of the wall as you're up against it walking down the street.
Right. Well,
So that's going with this. I'm trying to get a sense of a perspective of what that feels like, because additionally, if you look at the properties to the right on the corner of Golden Ridge, you know, what did the height of these buildings look like next to those buildings?
right. Yeah.
The ones to the left that are the rentals that are to the left are substantially lower, but this project buildings are not right atop them. There's some distance between the two, but these buildings are right atop the buildings, the condo project or the townhouse project that's to the right. So it would be interesting to see, you know, what the relative, you know, what do those buildings look like next to these buildings in terms of the height? Are these substantially higher than those? I mean, what does that feel like?
So
And I
yeah, it
can't
would
tell
be-
from these documents here. I can't tell that.
Right, it would be good for us to possibly do a drawing that showed some of the condos on the right-hand side to the east you're talking about, right?
To the east, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where the public comment and concern is coming from. So I'm
Yes.
trying to be sensitive about that
Yeah.
and get
Yeah.
sort of
We
a
might be able to-
real feel. I mean, this is a pretty drawing, but is it accurate? I don't know.
We could
And that's-
probably insert a photo and do a montage with our rendering and show you what that looks like. Originally, we had the retaining wall right on the back of the sidewalk, which was pretty severe. But now that we have a 5-foot utility setback, I think we can soften that up a little bit. It won't feel quite so big and hard. And there'll be plants growing on it, so that'll help it.
Well, you understand where I'm going with that. And this would be going forward as you come further down and you come back to the board.
Yes, I totally understand.
Heads up about that. So, okay, and then regarding the parking, I still have a question about this sort of thing with parking in general. So when you have the ADU unit, the parking space, or the ADA, I'm sorry, with the ADA parking space, if you have no placard holders living in the complex, then that space still must be reserved for a guest or whatever, so it's not a parkable space. Am I correct about it? It's only parkable for somebody with the blue placard.
That's an interesting question.
Am I correct in that thinking?
Probably, yes, probably that is true.
And then when you add in the car charging spaces, how does that work? Like if somebody, I mean, maybe everybody in the unit has an electric car, maybe nobody in the complex has an electric car. Do those have to stay reserved? I asked this about the Woodmark project. I never got a clear answer on it. Do those have to stay reserved for electric cars, or can they be used for others if there is no electric car owning person in the complex? How does that work? Because you're going to be required to have those back there.
Yes, we are. And I think there was 3 different ways we could do it. One was a fast charger. And if we had a fast charger, we only needed to have one. So I believe what happens in that situation is people move their cars around. Once they're done with the fast charge, then they move their car to a different spot. But I'm not sure about the public at large being able to use one of them. I don't think I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I can address that from a code standpoint. So the electric vehicle charging is intended to be for the residences. In this case, if it's a commercial use, then it's, of course, a resident could allow a guest to use it, but generally it's going to be a resident. And so in terms of an HOA or organization, in terms of who gets assigned that space, presumably they would be able to work out if someone has an electric car or 2 people have it. You know, you can have one charger located where it can work for 2 and possibly 3, depending on the length of the cord, different parking spaces. So you could have 2 people who have electric vehicles. They could have 2, the 2 spaces that are within the electric car charging area. In this case, I would assume that you generally want to have, other than if there's a periodic rearrangement, you generally want to have those assigned spaces, as people generally like to have assigned spaces and no other parking spaces. So that's one way you could work it out. The other is, so if it is assigned to someone and they happen to have, someone there who doesn't have an electric vehicle, because you have 2 spaces available, but only one person owns an electric vehicle, then yes, it could still be used as a parking space in the meantime. It doesn't need to remain vacant simply because no one in the development has an electric car at that time.
Well, just to be clear, where I'm going with this is, let's just hypothetically say we've got 10 spaces, but one is lost to ADA. Unless you have a permanent residence with a placard, that's a lost space. So then you have 9 spaces left, and let's just say, just to pick some numbers, you had 15 cars associated with the residents. Half the residents are single people, the other half of the residents are a couple, let's just say. And now you're down to 9, and if you have to designate certain spaces, like if you have that electric car station, do you have to keep that free to charge an electric car, or can that be encumbered with all the other cars? So like, let's just say that, anyway, you kind of get where I'm getting at, because there's concern amongst the residents about parking, which they already feel is tight and difficult to park at certain times of the day, the residents that already live there. That's why I'm addressing that. And I appreciate that there's 10 new parking spaces on the street, but those can be used by anybody. Those aren't designated to the residents, correct?
That's right.
The street parking. I mean, somebody could go to Gravenstein Grill and park there, for example, let's just say.
Right.
That's correct. Correct in assuming that, yeah. So anyway, I'm just throwing that on the table about the parking. And it looks like with the parking unit, as Ted suggested, when you come up that easement parking spot, certainly the first one is going to be almost impossible to turn into, because you got to get up that thing and get into that tight little 8-foot wide space. So I guess just in general, what I'm saying is the parking seems difficult here. And I'm just throwing that out on the table for you to think about.
Could I make
that
address?
first unit, look at the first one, like number 10, you come uphill and then you got to kind of curve into that. And if there's somebody else parked in that number 9, I think that's going to be virtually impossible to get into.
Can I address these parking questions, please? Carrie?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Carrie's muted there.
Sorry.
Excuse me. Hi, folks. I'm Bob Massaro. I'm Beth's partner and Dante's partner in here. The parking Well, let me back up. With respect to the retaining wall question, the way these drawings are done, they're done in ArchiCAD, which means we actually design them and then they're rendered. I happen to count the risers on the stairs right there. And if you count the risers and you give it 7.5 inches per riser, the retaining wall as shown is just slightly over 7 feet tall. So I think the rendering's pretty close, if not dead on. But best point is correct. We will double check it to make sure that the rendering is accurate in terms of the height of the retaining wall. With respect to the parking.
But can I go back to that for just a second, please? The reason why I'm bringing this up is once this comes before the final design review and we're making, real recommendations and voting on it, I think it would be nice from a public point of view, if there's public interested, which there is, that you have that kind of perspective that they could see easily, like by putting maybe a couple people into the perspective.
I think your comments are, well, no, do I know what you're saying, but I completely agree with it. I mean, you're bringing up some excellent points. So we will reconfigure the rendering to show people standing there and some valid frame of reference so that people really understand how tall that wall is. Your comment on the handicap is excellent, and we'll have to think through that. I would think that by putting the 10 parking spaces in the street, that at least a good majority of those will be used by the tenants, the residents. With respect to the slope of the parking, we have to kind of rely on our civil engineer to take into consideration the turning radiuses and everything else. But you bring up a good point, so we will check that also. With respect to the EV charging stations, I'm a big believer in electric vehicles, and my plan is to put the duo of EV charging stations at every parking spot. So in other words, there's 10 parking spots, there will be 5 EV charging stations that take 2 cars at a time. So I want to foster electric vehicles, so we won't have a problem with people arm wrestling over who's got an electric vehicle and who gets to park there. So that's just something that I've always wanted to do. So anyway, I wanted to address the parking. So we've got the EV charging station covered. We're going to check with the civil engineer on the slope and access on the parking space number 9 and number 10. The comment about the handicap is an excellent one. We'll take a look at that, but I feel that the street parking is going to make a difference, and we'll come back with clearer renderings and a better frame of reference with respect to the height of the retaining wall.
Yeah. I think that would be very helpful.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thanks very much.
Any other questions, Christine?
No, I don't. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any other members have questions before we open it up to comments from the public? Seeing none, let's go ahead and open our public comment.
And Beth, can you stop your screen share so we can see more different people? Thank you. Okay, and so I will facilitate public comment. We do have 3 minutes for each public comment. I do not have an electronic timer on the screen like we do for city council meetings, but I can certainly give you a 30-second warning as per normal. And so if you do want to make a comment, you can either raise your hand physically or use the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen, if you can see that, or you can note in the chat that you'd like to make a comment. Okay, I see Tom has his hand raised. So Tom, please proceed with your comment. And
Tom, you're muted.
You will need to unmute yourself.
Okay, somebody muted me. Thank you. And I have to speak quickly because I only have 3 minutes. And I thank you for the opportunity to do this. And I appreciate all the effort that's gone into this to make it a green project, affordable housing. I'm all for that. My issue is I'm a homeowner, I'm a property owner at 128 Golden Ridge. And what I am looking at is this is a 0.39 acres 2/5 of an acre for 10 units. It's just way too many units for such a small space, especially if it's going to come through our development at the on Golden Ridge. It's just not made for two-way traffic of that type. I look at the way it's laid out, and I think of FedEx. Instead of having 1 or 2 units on a 0.4 acres, you have FedEx coming in times 10, UPS times 10, Postal Service times 10, Amazon times 10, delivery of appliances and furniture times 10. This is a lot of traffic in and out. There's no turnaround. It's 25 feet wide, which is as wide as long as my truck. So it means that every big delivery coming in is going to come in and then back up with the backup buzzers all the way down to Golden Ridge, again, affecting the noise and the ambience of our community there. I think that's a problem that needs to be addressed. The other part of that is that the Bodega Avenue is the address, the access is Golden Ridge. That's not going to work for a lot of deliveries, believe me. I lived on Valentine Avenue here, but I had an Orchard Lane access to my driveway. Nobody could figure out where I lived. So this is a disconnect already just on the address. I don't see any place for mail. I don't know where the mail gets done, where it gets distributed, how often mail trucks come in. I look down at the Bodega Avenue parking, and I think, well, maybe that's where it comes in. There's no yellow loading zone for on the off-street parking for commercial deliveries. It's just 10 because you've made it on the formula to make sure that there's 10 site parking spots down on Bodega Avenue and 10 up at the site. We're finding
Tom,
that
you have
parking-
about 15 seconds.
Okay. Well, obviously I have some issues with using the access from Golden Ridge. I also have an issue with the 22-foot high, 8 feet from my back fence. 22 feet high, I have a 6-foot fence. This is 4 times as high. This is my view to the west where I would normally get my breezes. I would get sunsets. That's going to be gone. And it's only 8 feet from my fence for the 8-foot backyard, which is another issue I had on rear yard setbacks, but
And Tom,
I'll save that.
Yeah, and just so you all know, you can also submit public comments to us at the city, and we'll forward that to the developer and the DRB as well as we go through this process.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Any other public comments? Okay, I am not seeing any other comments. Again, you can raise your hand, simply unmute yourself if you'd like to make a comment and start talking, or use the chat. And I see we have one person who got bumped off and is logging back on, but I did not see any other public comments.
Sounds good. Thank you for that. And thank you for the public comment, Tom. Then we'll bring it back to the board, and we are preliminary review. So I think we can kind of keep this casual. Our goal today is to pass on any comments or thoughts to Planning Commission and City Council. And also
Ted,
to,
sorry, Ted, I did just get a note that Candace is having some technical difficulties, but did want to make a comment.
okay,
Candace,
is she ready?
are you available?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
Yes,
we
go ahead,
heard you, then
Candace.
you broke up a little bit. Try it again, Candace. No, still can't hear her.
And she is unmuted on our side, so I know Candace did submit a public comment that has been forwarded to you as well.
Okay. Candace, if your line clears up, let us know and we'll get back to you. Okay. Yeah, if Candace comes through, Candace, you can either send a chat to Carrie.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, I think we might have you now.
Okay.
Now I think you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. Lots of technology problems here. We did send in several questions and concerns. And as I'm listening to the whole presentation today, what I'm seeing loud and clear is almost a lack of attention at all to the fact that the community you're creating is coming in another community and you are part of a bigger community. How are you going to address the discomfort and the needs of the people next door to you whose your lives are changing? You know, building these walls is going to take away the sun from my backyard. Using our driveway is going to be so congested that it's going to be a lifestyle change for all of us. Where is the community sense in all of that? And that's directed at Bob and the people that are putting this project together. Have you considered us in your program as you've been designing this building?
Can anybody hear that?
Hello?
Yes, we heard that. We thought you might have more to add.
No.
Okay.
Oh, I have more. I have things I want. My name is Marcel DeGrosse, 122 Golden Ridge. Now, everyone's talked for an hour and 7 minutes, and we get 3 minutes per person. And I think that's wrong. Okay, one. Number two, we just got the notice for this meeting last Thursday. We've had no chance to contact counsel, i.e. lawyers or anything like that. You're going to be running equipment up our driveway for the better part of a year and a half, making our lives miserable, okay? And so, and destroying, I know you're gonna be running excavators, backhoes, et cetera, up there. How is this gonna make our lives living hell, okay, for a better part of a year and a half? When does the density, okay, of a community, when do we stop the density? How do we get as big as San Jose, as big as San Francisco? How do we keep going up? This whole parking situation, like Tom said, you can't get a 14-foot pickup truck's not gonna be able to turn around back there. He's right. They're gonna come right back down this road. And what if there's a fire? Are you going to be able to get 2 fire trucks up here, one coming in, one going out? No, you're not. And we are living in a fire zone.
I think there's a big hypocrisy in creating a nice community by destroying the communities around it. That's what I think.
Yeah, and this is called 7950 Bodega Bay Avenue. Yet really, it's Golden Ridge. You're using our access, okay, easement, okay, which was an agreement signed in 1993, okay. Why don't you instead of creating parking spaces on Bodega Bay Avenue, why don't you A, have less units, 2, lower so that you don't block out the sun from people, and 3, run your driveway up Bodega Bay Avenue. And I'll tell you why.
You have 20 seconds left.
I'm pretty much done for now, but Candace is right.
Okay, and it looks like we have a comment from Anna.
Yes. My name is Anna Ressler, and I live in 124 Golden Ridge. This is a small community, and we have so many safety concerns, plus the trees, you know, that I'm concerned about the trees. We have somebody in here who was checked the diameter on the trees, and they are checking into that because it will damage our trees. The safety concern that we all have is that I cannot see 32 cars coming in and out of the Golden Ridge Avenue. First of all, the entrance to the parking lot is very narrow. There's no way, it's not appropriate for two cars. It's only for one car. I don't see, actually, we did have 2 accidents already, because when people coming out, backing out of the carport and somebody is getting into the building, that's how we have 2 accidents. So there is not enough space in there. My concern is a safety issue, that if we're coming out, we're not gonna be able to go to the parking lot because the cars coming in and out. And there's a lot of people that are driving fast. So safety issues, my concern, the trees and all the noise that that's gonna interrupt our lives. So please, you know, I have some, really somebody needs to come and check the fire trucks. You know, we have so many issues with that. People get sick, and how are we gonna get out of our carports when another car is coming in and out, when it's only the narrow part, the narrow road that we have, the narrow parking lot. So there's a lot of concerns. Please, I'm not talking about, you know, it's good that it will be 10 is too many units for us. I mean, if we consider to have less than that, that would be great. But having 10 units, 32 cars in and out of our parking lot, only one exit, very hard to believe. I can see accidents happen. And who knows, you know, somebody can get hit coming out of the parking lot, coming out of our places. That's very, very safety concern. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other comments, Carrie?
Thank you. I'm looking around, and I think we are now done with public comment. I don't see any further hands.
All right. So I'd like to thank everybody for their public comments and concerns. I would like to just remind people that are concerned that this is preliminary review. So this is the first time this project is coming before us. No decisions being made today. And as Carrie outlined, from here, this is going to go to the Planning Commission and then the council and then back to design review. So there's going to be lots of opportunities to voice your concerns along the way. So that said, I think we'll bring it back to the design review board here for comments. And as I was saying before, this is preliminary review. So you know, if we want to have some question and answer sort of stuff with the applicant, I don't really see a problem with keeping this kind of informal and just discussion based. And a reminder that, you know, we're not making a decision today. We're passing on our recommendations to both the applicant and any comments that we have to both the City Council and the Planning Commission, so that if there are changes we would like to see as it does make its way back to us, hopefully those can be addressed as the design develops. So that said, why don't we just start with some kind of initial observations and comments. And Christine, we ended with you. How about we start with you coming back the other way? Is that all right?
That sounds fine.
Great.
So I want to noodle around on this parking thing again. I think Tom at 128 Golden Ridge made couple really good points that I hadn't thought of, which is the inability to turn around. So if those spaces are parked out, everybody's home, there's no way to turn around. You're gonna have to back in and back out. And for anything of any size, like a UPS or a FedEx or anything, they're not turning around either. So, and that is a good consideration with this sort of new normal we have where everybody works at home and you get UPS coming and FedEx coming all the time. That is something to consider. And that's really all I have to say about it. It seems a bit hazardous to me with the inability to turn around, to have a big truck backing down and then backing through the condo, the townhouses. That does seem very problematic to me. The other thing that I had mentioned before, and I would like to see, is some kind of drawing or something that shows here's these units and here's the units at this Golden Ridge, complex on the corner there, and what do they look like side by side? Because this is a western exposure, and it is very reasonable to assume that these people's light into their buildings are going to be completely blocked by these units. So, but maybe that's not, it just kind of depends on the relative perspective and the sun angles, and it would be interesting to see that.
It's interesting too, Christine. I'm just looking at page 9 of the staff report. The fire department commented, and they just their comment number 2G says hammerhead turnarounds as required. And I'm not up on my fire code in terms of turnarounding fire trucks, but that's something they noted as well. So I think as this goes through, probably at the planning commission level, there's probably going to need to be a little more research on what exactly that means.
Well, a hammerhead turnaround and that site is going to eat up a lot of the site. It is interesting to think about, see, when they're trying to get up there, because I had a fire at the end of my road some years back, and the house burned to the ground, but they couldn't access it because they couldn't turn around. They won't come up there if they can't turn around.
Right.
So that's an interesting point. So yeah, this is going to be interesting. I mean, I think that would be something that should be looked at with fire pretty much immediately to see how that goes. So, I mean, like, I watched this in real time, and they rolled the hose all the way up my road because they couldn't turn around. It was really quite impressive. It was like not something, the house burned down. They couldn't get there quick enough because they couldn't get there. It's interesting to think about. So
it is, and it looks like Beth has something to say about that. Our Beth with the applicant.
Yes, so it's been by the fire department, and a fire department does not require a turnaround as long as they can get with their truck within 100 feet of the extent of the building. And this is within 100 feet of the building if they would park on Bodega Avenue, and then they would go up the steps.
Gotcha. So their approach would be off Bodega, not necessarily up the driveway.
Okay, well, let me ask another question. Not to just keep noodling this thing down, but the fire comes and the Bodega Avenue parking spaces are parked out. Then what?
They park on the outside of the cars, and they just go through them.
They just block the street and set up in the
street.
And
this is certainly something that, as staff, we can discuss with the fire department to clarify that comment as well, so that if there are any modifications, we know that.
Yeah.
I just suggest, like, such a critical thing that maybe the applicant would want to get that handled and signed off sooner and not later.
And Lars, you had your hand up there?
I think just not fire related, but parking related. I don't know if there's a drawing in the packet that shows the driveway is a continuation essentially of the driveway on that other property. And there's parking shown on the north side of that driveway, the northwest corner. So from that visual, it looks exactly the same as what would be on the new parcel. So if you can turn around from there, and get out, you can do it from the new property, is what it looks like.
Right.
So I don't know if that's true or if that's accurate or not, but it's what I see in a drawing.
Yeah, it looks like it's kind of continuing the same width as it moves to the west there onto the new parcel. And I guess if you can't turn around, I guess you're just backing up, twice as far, or 60% further, or whatever it is. I'm not sure.
Or you're backing up in a 3-point turn or whatever.
Yeah, 5-point turn, whatever the case may be. But yeah, it looks like pretty much the same condition as what is existing. So you've got carports on one side and you've got a couple parking spaces on the other.
It follows the easement.
Okay, so I have another
Yeah.
comment.
Yes.
There's the tree, there's a very beautiful protected tree on the, I'm going to call it the southeast corner on the Golden Ridge townhouse complex, right there on the corner.
Yep.
And it's not shown, interesting enough, on the site one. Just not shown. But
It's not.
it's right up against the wall there. I mean, when that wall, that tree is going to be an impediment to putting in that wall. There's no question about it. I went out there and measured it and looked. It's now there was this discussion about hand probing and drilling piers, but those piers for that wall are going to be substantial. And so, at any rate, I'm very concerned about that particular tree because that's a really nice protected heritage tree in that corner there. And somebody's obviously gone to some great length and care to maintain that tree, unlike the other oaks that are down on Bodega Avenue that would be removed to put the sidewalk in. This tree has been maintained and cared for. And it's definitely on the property of maybe 126. I don't know what those properties are, but it's the corner property there.
Yeah.
So I'm putting that out there.
I believe that's tree 780 as identified in the arborist report. That was the one that she did want to take a closer look at.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think that tree 774 and 773, I think are the biggest concern trees, and 774 and 773 kind of in the northwest corner, I think are a big concern just because of how crowded that parking and trash enclosure area is. It's really packed in there.
Well,
Okay, and I have one more comment.
Sure.
To me, the project is very ominous and oppressive from the Bodega Avenue venue. And I would wonder why you wouldn't consider putting one of the less tall units so that when you're up against that wall, you just don't have so much height. You've got at least 30 to 32 feet going straight up from the sidewalk. And I thought, well, why wouldn't you put one of the single-story units in that location to soften that?
Yeah,
that's going to be a big, oppressive, tall thing.
Yeah, on lots
right
9 and 10.
Lots 9 and 10, single story. I suspect if you mark it next to the adjacent buildings, it's going to seem really tall compared to the Golden Ridge buildings. But nonetheless, just when you're coming across there, it's going to be substantial. 32 feet is substantial. So that's just another. I'm just kind of putting thoughts out there. I'm not making anything beyond that.
So I think to that point, the applicants have already agreed to look at the neighbor buildings in relation to theirs, but they're not just one-story buildings on a flat piece of ground, downtown Sebastopol. Like there's a hill, they're on a hill, and they're 2-story. So I just was over there on the cemetery side looking across, took a picture, and it's like, it goes up to those houses pretty tall. So I'd be surprised if these buildings are that much different in they're obviously different character. There's a different density, but in terms of height, I'd be surprised if they're much different than some of the ones in that corner. But we've already heard that the applicants will address that in a drawing. So,
but in this particular case, I'm just saying, as you're going along the sidewalk there, that existing unit is it's softened somehow by the roof slopes and the landscaping, and I don't know how to express it more than that right now. But once you transition to the next thing, it's like a wall. You've got the wall, and the style of the architecture is just pretty much straight up. So I'm just making a comment about that.
Yeah, it will be
It's
interesting to
small.
see them in. It will be interesting to see them in context, because the neighboring buildings are softened by, they have street trees and they have shrubs, but they are 2-story buildings with pretty steep roofs on slightly lower ground plane, but they are pretty tall relative to Bodega as well. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that illustration. I think would be valuable. And I don't disagree that lots 9 and 10, maybe they could flip flop those things. I know it kind of changes the rhythm of the thing, because they probably want the distribution of units kind of the way it is in terms of loft units versus non-loft units. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if you could step it down to Bodega, because you do have an 8-foot retaining wall out there, a 7+ foot retaining wall out there. Let's see. Carrie, do you have comments?
Oh yeah, thanks, Ted. Yeah, I'd like to thank the applicant. It's a really well represented project. It's tricky. You're threading a needle. It's been graphically accessible for us to really look at. I know there's a lot of work involved, so I'd like to say thanks. It's good to see this level of work put before us. It's really helpful. I'd also like to thank the comments as well from the public. I tried to itemize my items. So the big issues were the trees in some way. We said we'd look at those, but I do think that the impacts will be significant. It'll be hard to mitigate even with permeable paving or pier and grade beams, the impacts that they'll have. So those are just my common thoughts there. Some of the utilities actually at the entry off of Bodega, I saw all the water meters sort of stacked up at the very entry. It's all preliminary, but I mean, you'll have backflow preventers and those sort of things. So I don't know how that quite plays into the whole utilities package. So, I mean, that's kind of a pretty big entry arrival feature. The retaining walls, they have a graphicness to them. And I think that's just its modernity, and that's nice. I think that's just honest, and I think it's what it'll be. It'd be nice to see that sort of split, but I know you really can't do much more other than play off of that utility easement and call it what it is. The parking is really a tight one. I'm usually always looking for a 45-foot minimum back out distance, and without it, it's hard. That's even my little Tacoma. I have a 2004 Tacoma pickup truck, and it's almost hard to turn that thing around a parking lot that's got a less than a 45-foot from nose in to back out. So that's going to be tricky. And again, I know you're threading the needle there. So EVA, that was kind of picked up. Just in general terms on the landscape plans, they look good. They don't really quite reflect your visual imagery all that well. I'm seeing a real soft quality to your visual imagery, and I don't necessarily think that represents the nature of the planting plan. So you might look at that. There's some, well, let's just say that it should relate to actually the proposed conditions. Also, the bioretention area, you should probably look at a little bit more of a BASMA rated plant material that would take both wet and dry. So those are real detailed comments. That was sort of the micro, but the macro really that we all need to understand. And it's, again, we're looking at density row here. That's a kind of a joke that I have here, that it's zoned for high density, and the public needs to understand that this is zoned for that use. And so therefore we're a design review board looking at the comments that fit the character context and those natures and properties. But overall, the zoning is allowing this use. And again, the neighbors have that use. The neighbors on the other side have that use. Up and down the street, the neighbors have that use. So this property also has that use. And I think that the applicant's trying to determine how to really best fit a project, which I find is quite attractive and aesthetically appealing, to make that use fit. Now, how they do that is what we're here to review. But when we really start talking about the larger scale, the use is still allowed. High density, it'll go to an R7. but again, that's the biggest question here, that really doesn't even fall within the design review purview, in my opinion. So we're trying to, again, look at design review standards and guidelines, but the use is what the applicant has given us, and that's what we're here to follow. At least I am. And we're here to see a good project, something that's unique and it fits the character and work. And to really see it work, your city will definitely protect, as one of the public comments is the safety concerns. Safety concerns are a huge issue in any city, municipality. And so I think that the building department and the fire department and everyone here will be there to protect your best interests as the public. Again, I think the applicant still needs to thread a needle. So I think they'll take these comments that we're hopefully giving them and put those to use.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry.
Sure.
Ron, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not a big fan of high density housing. I know I'm a minority on this, and I'm very sympathetic to the neighbors there, as well as where Woodmark. I mean, unfortunately, I think the town is going in a very slow pace towards San Jose or San Francisco. We'll never get there. I'm not going to vote against this because of that. It's just my personal feeling. And I think the problem here was in 1993 when they put an easement through there and not developed the back lot first. I mean, I would really hate to live there during this construction. It was just poor planning when none of us were around. Well, I was around, but I was an Occidental. So that's kind of it. I guess we'll have to come back to it. And that's my 2 cents. And I think I'm going to bail out.
All right. Thanks, Ron.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
I can't stand it anymore. Okay.
Lars, thanks, Ron. Lars, what are your comments?
Well, I'd like to echo what Kerry was saying, just thanking the applicant for the presentation. I think just from that perspective, it's very detailed and thought through in many ways. So I appreciate just that level, and then the intent of certainly of green building and net zero energy is like, that's spot on. There's no other way to build right now, in my opinion, and the more we can do that, the better off we're all going to be. So the impact of a construction site on neighbors is let's call it 1.5 years, like one of the commenters did, but the impact of, on the climate is a much bigger picture, and this building is really working hard to do that. And I really, really appreciate that. So I think in the staff, well, actually, let me say in terms of, and then kind of the expression, the architectural expression and style, I think is a really nice attempt to have varied scale and actually play off even some stuff in the neighborhood. There's the property across Golden Ridge, has these kind of, I just took a picture of today, has these kind of bay windows with some wood siding detail, like, okay, that was done, whatever, 20, 30 years ago. And now this is today's version of that, in a sense. It's how do you, the pop out of the shower is like the bay window across that street. And I think it's a modern take on in a similar context that we have around Sebastopol. So I appreciate that as well. But staff asked us to specifically talk about like some of the changes to the development standards. I think to me, those are very minimal. The applicant has worked hard to offset this for that. The setback changes are very minor. I mean, obviously other than the 0 lot line setback for townhomes, but that makes perfect sense to me. The orientation of the units, like creating the courtyard space, so the neighbor on the corner has a really nice courtyard feel too. I mean, I walked up the shared driveway and looked in there, and it looks like a nice space on the interior. So they're creating their own version of that. Our standards talk about facing the street, but in this case, a very busy street, it's better to reflect or mimic what the neighbor has and focus inward, I think, rather than go and focus to the street and kind of where people enter their units and hang out. I think that makes a lot of sense. That and the retaining wall, I mean, that whole piece, sure, that's a big item. It was when we were looking at Woodmark, and it's a difficult site. And, you know, if you could step every unit up by 6 inches or a foot, you know, from going up from Bodega back, or in this case, I guess, dropping them all compared to what's proposed, you're not going to get an ADA accessible site. But it's going to cost more money to do that, grading wise and everything. But, you know, if you could create a little terraced, you know, each unit terraces down by a step or something, you'd have a lower retaining wall at the front. But that comes at a big challenge, you know, it has other implications and other challenges. But I think at least the way it's rendered to me, the wall, the buffer of the planting, the fence above, like the buildings are stepped back. It's not going to be a 32-foot wall on the sidewalk. It's going to step back some. It's clearly not way back, but it's an urban property. I mean, it's a challenge. It's what we came up with again at the Woodmark property. This is part of the city. It's not part of the county. It's the edge, and so it's challenging, right? It's a border between rural and urban. And how do you mitigate that? I think it's, you know, people who've been living in kind of that in-between zone for 30 years appreciate their rural quality, and yet you can walk to downtown. It's in the city. So to balance, it's hard to balance that, but we need housing, we need density. I think there's not a lot of parcels in the city that it's available. And so I don't know, that I just see it as a really good effort to balance a lot of, you know, different concerns and come up with a pretty compelling proposal.
Yeah.
And I won't talk about the trees because I know it's a big issue, and other people, that's always well represented.
All right, fair enough. Thank you, Lars. And I think I feel very similar to the other board members. I do also want to say that I completely understand the concern of the neighbors. But to kind of build on what Lars was saying, the neighbors have lived next door to a piece of property that, as Carrie said, is zoned high density residential, but they've enjoyed it as this sort of rural neighbor. Has a couple, you know, old apple trees, and, you know, it's a very nice empty piece of property. But it has it's always had this built-in development potential, and it's finally getting to be developed. But I understand that means, you know, losing something in terms of character of the neighbors. So I feel for that, but at the same time, that this site has that potential, and the owner of this property is entitled to realize that potential. And the same goes with construction. You know, I've lived next door to construction sites, and it's not necessarily fun. And it is unfortunate. I think Ron mentioned it. It's unfortunate that the back wasn't developed first, and the thing wasn't actually, you know, phased out that way or built as one piece at one time. So I know that's an inconvenience. I know that construction is messy and dirty and loud. But at the same time, it sort of comes with the territory of living in town. You know, we're not living in the country on 5-acre parcels. Safety concerns, I think, will be addressed by the city, both in terms of emergency vehicles and parking and turnaround standards and those sorts of things. The city has all of those things, so I'm not concerned that those items will be addressed. And in terms of kind of use and development standards, I don't have a problem with the minor exceptions. I kind of view them as minor exceptions to the development standards that they're asking for. Especially when you look at things like, you know, the setbacks to these units are actually larger than a lot of the setbacks that the neighbors, you know, have. So neighbors are closer to property lines than some of these units are going to be. So, and, you know, addressing bodega, I think the design makes sense. So for me, you know, I think there's a lot of things to like about this. I agree. I like the architecture. I like the way it's working. I think Lars mentioned it. I like the shower pop out. I think it's cool. I like the contemporary design. I like the pedestrian connection to bodega. I think that kind of addresses that design review guideline that things need to address the street. I like it addressing the street. I like the green building aspects about it. I like the approach to energy consumption. And I have some concerns. Trees, we talked about, we're going to revisit them. The retaining wall, I think it is an interesting idea to step down the buildings to minimize that retaining wall. But I also I'd like to see some detail on the retaining wall. Is it board form concrete? What is it? You know, can we do something so that it is, like Carrie said, kind of an honest wall? I don't think I'm opposed to the wall. I think if we can minimize it, let's minimize it. I like that there's a landscape buffer to it. You know, can we grade up to it in that landscape buffer? I don't know. I do think that the trashing and the parking area, it just feels really tight there. But again, I think the city standards are going to kind of kick in and tell us that works or that doesn't work or whatever. But it does feel very tight. And I think Christine's idea of, you know, flip-flopping a lower unit to the bodega side might help break down that mass on the bodega side, because we are starting with a 7-foot retaining wall and then going to a unit. You know, so maybe you go a low unit on both ends and 3 stacked larger units in the middle. I don't know. Or, you know, Lars's thought of cascading it down or stair stepping it down makes sense as well. So those are the comments I have. Anybody have any additions? And if not,
yeah, I think all the finished floors are sitting at 242, and that's just right at the top of that ridge. So it's like pretty much right at grade. Yeah. I was wondering real quick for Carrie, our planning director, it said nothing to be allowed within that public utility easement, and that is the back of sidewalk, nothing vertical from there to pick up that grade, soften the wall. I mean,
so plantings and things like that are fine. That's not, what we don't want in easement is any sort of structure, anything that can be, you know, so basically if the city needs to go and access that easement, we don't want anything built on top of it that's going to, you know, get destroyed. Not that plants won't get destroyed, but something like that certainly could be done. What were you thinking?
I was thinking back a sidewalk maybe had a 1-foot curb, you know, and then you're able to slope that grade up to the wall and you can get a terrace effect. But bringing the grade down below sidewalk is always a tricky one. It makes it more recessed than it does advanced and taller. So I'm only asking, I don't know what the city will allow there.
Sure, and I can talk to the city engineer and public works director. They are, they're the people who would generally be the folks going into, you know, if they need to replace, I believe is that the water or the sewer? That's just public utilities in general. So if they have water main coming through there, which is usually where they do it, and they have to replace a water main, what they don't want to have to do is, you know, remove someone's structure. They do often go under, you know, obviously driveway access easements and things like that. A small curb may not be an issue for them. They would not want anything that was a structural retaining wall.
Right.
Though.
Thank you.
All right. Any other further comments? And I'll ask our applicant, Beth, is that fairly clear? As clear as we can make it anyway?
Yes, very much so. Thank you very much. I appreciate all your comments and help. It really helps us to get the project to be a better project.
Yeah, and I'll echo what other members have said. This is a great package. It was clear, really well put together, easy to understand. Yeah, really appreciate the submittal. So
that's great.
All
And
right.
since this is, Ted, since this is a formal recommendation to the Planning Commission regarding not the design, but the planned community zoning, I heard at least 3 of you make comments about it. If you would entertain a motion, just to make sure that everyone is on board with the same, being okay with the PC request, that'd be great.
The request to go to an R7 from an HD?
They are R7. They're requesting the planned community zoning, which is those small changes outlined to the setbacks, the let me see. I'm sorry.
Setbacks,
I'm on the drawing
density.
sheet, so yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
There's no change to the density that is within our code. The changes are, yeah, the accessory structure setback on the carport, the side yard setback, and then the overall lot size for the individual units and the interior side yard setbacks.
Gotcha.
With being
So-
0 as their townhomes.
Okay, so basically a motion that, well, that we support that change.
I have a question about that. To Carrie.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Two quick questions. So in the change from the one zoning to the other, how does that change the property line setback at the Golden Ridge complex?
Sure. So normally it would need to be maintained as is. I believe it is a 9-foot setback based on the property width, and they're requesting that it be 8 feet.
Okay, because it's a little confusing to me as to whether that's a side yard setback or a backyard setback because of the orientation of the building.
Right, and so the way it's described in the staff report, and I tried to work with Alan a little bit on this, and because it can be confusing. So currently, it's one lot, and they're considered side yards. That side yard setback from the Golden Ridge, so on the east-west, so Golden Ridge townhomes. And I'm sorry, I don't know the name of that development, if there's a name for the townhomes, but the Golden Ridge townhomes, and then the apartments on the other side. That is required to have a 9-foot setback. They will turn into and be called rear yards once the subdivision is completed, and they're requesting that those setbacks be 8 feet.
Okay,
Gotcha.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm a little slow on this, Carrie, but let me run by this one more time. So the actual setback for the backyard is 20-foot minimum. And so this becomes a backyard with an 8-foot minimum. So it's going from a backyard setback of 20 feet. The orientation of the buildings is where I'm getting stuck here.
Sure. So think of it this way: that if you look at the current parcel, and this is kind of how I look at things, because people buy their property with certain expectations of, if what their side yard is versus what the adjoining backyard is, and so that's how we look at it as one parcel right now. So forget about the fact that it's going to be subdivided for just a moment. Bodega is the front yard, and then the north property line where the carports are is the rear yard. And then the 2 side yards between the Golden Ridge townhomes on the west, the east-west property lines are the side yard property lines.
Okay, so on that property right now, the way it's zoned today, what can you build on that property?
It would have a 9-foot side yard setback.
But what could you build on that property? How many units?
It's the same density. It's in the staff report. I believe it's 4.7 to 9.8 units. We round up if it's greater than half a unit, and so it's 5 to 10 units.
But studios only count for half a unit.
Wait, I'm sorry. This is just I just have to understand this. I'm sorry, but when you have that many units, how do you orientate what's a side yard and a front yard?
So because that's the primary reason they're requesting the planned community zoning, because they're developing. So if you had sort of a greenfield development like some of the Roanoke Park subdivisions, a very, very large, say 200-acre subdivision, you could do, and actually it's not even that, we've got a application in for preliminary review for someone who wants to just do a 5-unit subdivision. They would generally have the same front yard. You'd put in streets, and anything facing a new street would be the front yard, and then the opposite would be a rear yard as we're doing the subdivision. Because they're not orienting things north-south in this particular development, that is the reason for, one of the reasons that they're going through the planned community zoning process.
Okay, and then you had the minimum lot size. How does the minimum lot size change? So you're saying with the new zoning, so you have the old zoning and the minimum lot size is?
Right, so the minimum lot area under R7 is 8,000 square feet, and we do allow smaller when it's, and we allow for a small lot subdivision. They're not going through that process because they have other standards they're requesting to modify, but if they were going through a small lot subdivision, the standard for that is 1,500 square feet. However, you can have smaller lots sizes when the units are attached. So if you're doing sort of standalone, 8,000 square foot kind of lots, and they have, I believe, 17,000 square feet right now. So they have more than the 15,000 square feet for small lot subdivisions. They have more square footage than that for each parcel. What they're asking for is the 9,535 square feet for the common parcel, and then the sort of condo or the individual lots would be between 680 and 850 square feet. So the average size of it meets that 1,500 small lot subdivision requirement. And that 1,500 square foot, if it's on it's the first, on page 3 of your staff report, it's the first component of the, let me just show it actually, because it might be a little bit easier. On my screen, I'm showing the table. You can see the standard for a small lot subdivision in an R7 zone is 1,500 square feet per unit. It can be reduced if you're doing townhomes where the units are attached. They are proposing less than that, which, as I said, is allowed for that small lot subdivision like this. That's the intent of that code. But they also have a much larger common parcel. So if you take the total size of the total acreage or square foot of the total property, it is actually more than 1,500 square feet per unit.
Okay.
And then here's the normal, like if it's a not subdivided lot as it stands, it would have the 9 foot side yard setback. What they're sort of turning that into, and thank you, we can revise this chart so it's clearer, and we can actually use east and west so it's maybe less confusing for people. Since this has, east, west, north, south, regular lot lines, that new lot line becomes the rear yard setback for each of the properties as they're developing, and it would be an 8 foot setback as required. So they are requesting a 1 foot reduction on the east and west property lines in the setback. And
okay.
The other part of that is they are being more strict on the accessory structures. Normally you can have a accessory structure 3 feet from a property line. And they're basically saying, we're going to reduce the side yard, what's the neighbor's side yard setback, but we're not going to allow any accessory structures within that area.
Okay. That's interesting. Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Carrie. Okay, so back to our motion to.
Should we call Ron and get him back over here?
I think you still have a quorum, so you're fine with all this.
We're good to go. Somebody want to throw a motion on the table? Recommending or in agreement with the change of,
R7 of the PC zoning.
yep,
Sure.
You can just say so moved, Carrie. You don't have to.
yeah, so,
Yeah, there you go. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I looked at the area development map that was provided by the applicant, and it sits within a PC development zoning, so makes sense to me.
yeah, makes sense to me too.
Yeah.
All right, so Carrie, can I say that you moved the motion or?
Yeah, do I have to say that again?
No.
Didn't know we were making motions today, but okay, if I'm making a motion to look at, the recommendation for planning to rezone this parcel from R7 to a PC zoning, there it is.
There we go. Thank you. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, second by Lars. Any additional commentary? Seeing none, let's call the question. All in favor of the resolution, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
All right, and I will ask Christine as well, since
And
we can't see her hand. Thank you, Christine. Okay,
Christine's
so that
in with an
motion
aye.
carries 4-0 with one absent.
Okay, so that just says that we kind of agree with the change in zoning. Is there anything else the planning commission might need from us?
We will provide them the minutes from this meeting, as well as obviously as Kelly writes the staff report, I'll work with her on that, outlining your concerns in the staff report for the planning commission. And then we will also work with the fire department and other city departments to address some of the technical issues that were raised today.
Sounds great. All right, then I think that brings us to the end of our agenda, correct? Where's my agenda?
That is correct. That's the last item
correct.
on the agenda.
That is the last item on our agenda. So again, I'd like to thank our applicants and our members of the public that spoke. And then other than that, I think this meeting is adjourned.
All right. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
everyone.
Thanks, Ted.
All right.